And we're joined now by North Country Assemblyman Billy Jones, who represents the 115th District, covering Clinton and Franklin counties, and now, after redistricting, 5 towns in Essex County as well. Welcome. Happy New Year.
Great to be here, as always.
We just heard from Governor Kathy Hochul, sworn in this week, her first full term, making history as the first woman elected governor in New York. In her address on New Year's Day, she talked about what's topping her list of priorities for 2023. The top two, the rise in crime and the rising cost of living, inflation that's hurting a lot of New Yorkers struggling to get by. The census numbers backing that up. A lot of New Yorkers leaving the state. Are those priorities for you as well?
Absolutely. Those issues are certainly at the top of people's minds. I would say inflation more than crime here, but certainly crime issue was brought up, and we need to make some further changes with the criminal justice packages that were passed a couple of years back. Inflation, cost of living, workforce, and affordable housing affordability were the top issues that I kept hearing over and over again. And certainly we have to address them. That's our jobs. We need to work on this. And it all kind of leads into one another, right? If people can't afford to be here, then they're not going to take jobs. They need the 3 big things, right? We always talk about housing, transportation, childcare. That leads into workforce, and that leads into a lot of the workforce shortages that we're having, and the outward migration from New York. I'm glad that we have a governor now that is admitting that. She has mentioned it several times now, and we need to do something about that as well to keep people here in New York and attract people to New York State. Inflation
is high. People are hurting, struggling to get by. The United Way tells us the latest Alice numbers showing about half the families living in Clinton, Essex, and Franklin counties living paycheck to paycheck. What can you and your fellow lawmakers do to try to help along those lines with inflation and the rising cost of living right now?
It's a global issue, obviously, that we're going through right now. We're seeing some good signs in gas prices going down, but certainly the gas tax, the elimination of gas tax that we put on for most of last year, I think that helps. I would like to see that extended into the new year. I have a bill out now helping with home heating costs. Here in the North Country, we live in an atmosphere that people need to heat their homes in the winter. Been pretty mild so far, but we can't count on that. Obviously for the next 4 or 5 months here, we're going to go through some cold snaps, and people spend a lot of money doing that. I've heard from people all over the socioeconomic scale that are worried about heating their homes this year. And I have a bill that helps with that helps the people in the gap from heat to that helps our middle class people as well. And to eliminate the tax, we should eliminate the taxes on all home heating fuels.
That helps with the home heating. You talked about the gas tax holiday. What's the feeling among you and your colleagues about trying to extend that?
I think there's support among it. I think there's support among it from both houses and both sides of the aisle on that. Everybody says it's a budgetary item, but I do believe with the governor's help, we could do something on that just to extend it. Whatever we can do on the state level, we should do. We need to do everything we can to help families, to help individuals here, with their basic needs and living.
You introduced your home heating assistance bill last fall. You were hopeful at the time that the governor may get on board. Has she?
She has not yet, but we're still hopeful of that.
Affordable housing, you touched on that as well, another huge issue. You were at the opening of the new Northwoods project in Plattsburgh last month, 80 new units. Half of them will be rented to tenants who have special needs. They'll be offered help with transportation and mental health services. Very similar to the project in downtown Malone, 40 new units there with assistance and services to help the tenants. And the state has just approved a new housing project for Tupper Lake, 70 units at the former Overwood Dish Factory. That seems to be a model that a number of communities are choosing. Is it a good idea?
Certainly, and certainly a model that I've supported in each of those communities. And we need to see more of that. Affordable housing, yes, absolutely. But we need to also look into the definition of housing affordability. We don't have the housing stock, and then when something does become available, we're We're seeing bidding wars. We're seeing a lot of the things that are driving the costs up. For good, decent houses and housing, the costs have gone up a lot. And like I said before, we're seeing the struggles with our workforce in our hospitals and schools and municipalities and businesses. But if people, I've heard from stories, I've heard from schools that have offered good paying jobs to people. They move into the area, they can't find housing here, they can't find housing that they can afford, and they have to leave. They can't take the job, they can't stick with the job. We need to come up with a structure that helps that as well. And there's some ideas out there floating around.
There needs to be more housing available for
we need housing
all
stock.
income levels.
We need housing stock. Yes, I'm hearing it from everyone.
Leaving employers in a jam.
It is.
You mentioned also childcare, transportation. Those are still hurdles.
Absolutely. We live in a childcare desert here, Tom, and I'm trying everything that I can do to provide daycare providers. We need the daycare providers and the workers itself, but we need it at an affordable rate. Honestly, we've all dealt with childcare and childcare issues. Certainly, if you're on the lower income spectrum, it affects you more. But everybody deals with it, and we have to help out with that as well. We need to bring in workers, but we also need to take care of the people that we have now. And we don't have the housing stock now. We don't have child care services, and transportation continues to be an issue. A lot of work. We need to continue to hit those issues head on, but we also need people to come in here and take these jobs. We're seeing, like I said, we're seeing shortages in workers in every sector: municipal, businesses, schools, hospitals, everywhere you look, nonprofits, they need workers. And a lot of those three items that I just mentioned factor into that.
And when it comes to childcare, is the state taking steps to try to help to allow more daycare providers to open up?
We have put funding in there. We put record funding in last year's budget. We just need to make sure that it's implemented in a way, and we need our fair share here in the North Country, and implemented in a way where it's effective and helping families out with childcare.
And what are some of your other priorities for the session? Are there some bills you're planning to introduce?
Last year, I think I traveled to every fire district and every fire department in my district. Our volunteer firefighters and our volunteer fire departments, they're hurting for volunteers, for help. I've introduced a number of bills that helps in recruitment and retainment of our volunteers to try to help with their training. Also, I have a capital fund out there to help with equipment. The local taxpayers can't bear the burden of some of this equipment in the buildings that they need.
You did help last year. Local fire departments, volunteer fire departments, they can now recoup the costs that they weren't able to before. If they have a medical emergency, they take somebody to the hospital, they can bill that person's insurance company, they can bill them for providing those medical services, and that was a big thing for a number of local fire departments to be able to get that money now.
Absolutely. One of my proudest bills for the fact that some form of that legislation was around for 30, 40 years before I picked it up, 6 years prior. I think I picked it up my first or second year. And, FASNY and the Fire Chiefs Association, a lot of the organizations were really pushing for that, so it would help their members. You heard the testimonials. We were in Altona. We were at other fire departments around our region, and it was a statewide bill, so it's going to help a lot of communities and a lot of fire departments out with public safety.
The state's new Climate Act is moving forward. The scoping plan getting approval, zero emissions by 2040, electric cars and trucks by 2035. Ambitious.
We all want to help our climate out. We have to get the infrastructure there as well. Let's not put the cart before the horse here. If we're relying on electricity for everything in our electrical grid, you better darn make sure that we have the infrastructure in place before we implement a lot of these regulations. Let's be smart about this.
So a little too ambitious, too much, too soon?
I'm never going to say too ambitious. I'm going to say we better be prepared.
And what about the cost?
We better be prepared for that as well. In turn, on the other side of it, right here in Plattsburgh, we have our transportation manufacturing hub. What are we doing? We're building buses, electric buses right here. There is an economic upside to this.
Last summer, after the Supreme Court overturned New York's concealed carry law, you and your fellow lawmakers were called back for a special session to pass a new concealed carry law that you've spoken out about, that you and a number of other lawmakers feel was flawed, that the language expanding sensitive areas in the state where guns wouldn't be allowed was vague, and raised the question of whether it covered all of the Adirondack Park. Have the governor and state police adequately clarified the intent of the law?
Intent is one thing. Statute is another. And I am a co-sponsor on a couple of bills that clarifies that. You know what we went through with the reenactors, with military funerals. We need to clarify that in the law. That's one. Number two, there's no doubt. We have a gun violence crisis in our cities. We don't see it as much here. And I have a lot of people in my district with pistol permits and concealed carry permits, and they've never done anything wrong. And this law will affect them.
A lot of eyebrows were raised when lawmakers returned in December for a day to vote themselves a pay raise, about a 30% increase from $110,000 to $142,000 a year, now the highest paid state legislature in the nation. Did you vote for it?
I voted no on it. I'm very content with the salary that I had. Happy to serve my constituents with this. I was just happy with my salary. I never asked for more money. The only thing I ever asked for more money was for my staff. So I'm just happy to do my job. That's why I voted no.
Assemblyman Billy Jones, thanks a lot for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate it.
Always great to be here.
And just a reminder, you can watch Governor Kathy Hochul's State of the State address live this coming Tuesday, January 10th at 1 p.m. here on Mountain Lake PBS.